Visual Studio Code, not to be confused with Visual Studio. Blah, blah, blah. Hello, my name is Oluwatufumi Onaike, but you can call me Toff, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to go through the 3 key softwares that you need to try or think about using before you start any MSc Computer Science Conversion course. These are the 3 softwares that I wish I had tried before I'd started at Newcastle University, and honestly the 3 softwares that kind of changed my life at university itself. So the first software that you need to know is IntelliJ IDEA. This is an IDE, or an integrated development environment. So what does that mean? I'll give you a bit of a high-level summary about what that means, but I would recommend doing more research if you want to know the nitty-gritty. So your IDE contains your source code editor, your compiler, and your debugger, amongst other things. And this allows you to write the code itself in the editor. It allows you to test it by compiling it, and it allows you to debug as you go along, and it allows you to find issues when you compile. So IntelliJ IDEA was launched in 2001, but has been updated so many times and is a free software to use. IntelliJ isn't just for Java, it's for all languages that use the Java virtual machine. So that includes languages like Kotlin and Scala. So why use IntelliJ? So back when we first started on the course, back in September 2020, our core module leader of our very first sort of introduction to software development module suggested that we use IntelliJ. He suggested that we use it as beginners because it's just very helpful. There's a lot of autocomplete options. So for example, if you're coding in Java, you need a public static void main method, and that's how you run all the other methods within a class. So for example, in BlueJ, you will have to type public static void main out every time. In IntelliJ, you can just write psvm and then it completes that because it knows you want a public static void main method. This is the same with ideas such as fields. So you've created your class, let's say it's a car class, and your fields are speed and color, let's say. If you hover over those fields, there's a way that you can ask IntelliJ to create getter methods and setter methods for those fields for you. So I'll have these on the screen while I'm talking about them. So as a beginner, it helps really introduce you to how code should be written, but it also helps you minimize the amount of time spent troubleshooting really unnecessary problems. So let's say you wrote public void static main, for example. That's something that IntelliJ would flag up to you and be like, do you mean public static void main? It helps you jump over those initial teething issues you might have with coding quite easily, so you can get to issues that might be more around your logic. The issues that the actual IDE can't find itself, something that you need to know and you need to understand through practicing code. It helps you get up to speed and get started and get you actually coding sooner than if you're messing around trying to figure out how to do the basics of coding. That's why I would recommend IntelliJ. But there's also a number of other reasons to use IntelliJ, a number of other really great reasons. So for example, there are extensions that are based on PyCharm. So it means you can actually write Python code in IntelliJ and have all the amazing autocomplete and helpful features. Also, it links to your GitHub, so you can link to your repository and you can look at version control. And lastly, there's a bunch of YouTube tutorials from the creators of IntelliJ IDEA themselves on YouTube that are really simple, really helpful, and really can help you get to grips with IntelliJ. Though to be fair, IntelliJ is really quite easy to use and it's quite intuitive. That's why it's number 1. So number 2. Number 2 is Visual Studio Code, not to be confused with Visual Studio, not to be confused with Visual Studio, which is an IDE. Visual Studio Code is kind of a streamlined text editor, or a streamlined source code editor. So it doesn't quite have all the features of a fully fledged IDE, but this makes it perfect for a lot of web development. Released in 2015, Visual Studio Code is an open source free software that, like IntelliJ, is available on Windows, Mac and Linux. So Visual Studio Code was recommended during our web development course by the web development module leader. He suggested using any source code or text editor apart from Notepad, but he had used Visual Studio Code before and just said it's very helpful, especially when you're using languages such as when you're using languages such as CSS and JavaScript, because it highlights key pieces of code and code that does different things. So you're not just writing in black text all the time, you kind of have an idea, just glancing at a page, what is doing what based on the colour of the text. Visual Studio Code is also useful because it has a number of extensions, including Node.js, for example, really widely used extensions. Once again, like IntelliJ, it has links to GitHub, and when I was doing my research, even though I'd basically blindly followed my module leader's suggestion and downloaded Visual Studio Code. When I did some more research for this video, Visual Studio Code was at the top of the list for a lot of web developers. And I really want to put this out there because this video is for people that are preparing for the conversion course, but are also preparing for teaching themselves. And I know a lot of people enjoy web development as getting into coding before learning languages such as Java or Python. And Visual Studio Code is for you if you really want to start working in front-end development first. Software number 3. This is a software called DBeaver. So whereas IntelliJ and Visual Studio Code were actually quite similar because it was source code editing, DBeaver is quite different. DBeaver is a database administration tool. So when I was using DBeaver in class, and again DBeaver was suggested by the module leader, but when we were using DBeaver in class, we used SQL. We created a SQL database, but there were a number of different options for NoSQL databases. So what does DBeaver let you do? Because a lot of people can do database administration through the command line. That is 100% possible. But DBeaver gives you a graphical user interface and makes it a lot easier to query a database, set up a database, generate reports, create backups, and diagnose problems with your databases. DBeaver is really useful because it is more of a familiar tool. I mean, it's not a Microsoft application, but it has the sort of feel of a Microsoft application. You know, when you hover across the different tabs, you kind of know what information you'll get. And the best thing about DBeaver is if you want to, it's dual. So if you want to, you could use your SQL statements to set up your server, your database, but then you could also actually use the interface and click different buttons and enter in the information to create your database. So for people that don't know SQL very, very well, this can also be an idea of getting just used to SQL databases, getting used to ER diagrams, as ER diagrams are created as soon as you set up your database, showing the relationships between the databases you've created. I really enjoyed using DBeaver on the databases course, and it was really, really easy to use and really a good introduction to database administration for newbies. But the reason this is number 3 and not number 2 is because databases isn't for everybody. So let me do a quick recap of the tools. So tool number 1, and in my eyes the most useful if you're learning Java, is IntelliJ IDEA, which is a Java IDE. Tool number 2 is Visual Studio Code, super helpful for web development, super helpful for CSS, HTML and JavaScript, and is just helpful in general. And then tool number 3 is DBeaver, a database administration tool which helps you get to grips with databases, and you can do some quite complicated querying within the databases. So I hope that helps, and I hope this kind of gives you ideas of what tools to use if you're looking for tools and looking for where to get started, or if you're thinking of going to do a conversion course in the future and you think, okay, how can I get my hands dirty before I actually go to start my course? So I hope that was really helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other questions or anything else you would like to know just about the conversion course, about coding in general. I'm always happy to answer questions in videos. So have a lovely day and take care. Bye.